one. You might put them in the small vase. Right there. Yeah. That's about right. Beautiful. Greetings. Welcome to Mount Vernon Unitarian Church. I'm the Reverend Christian Schmidt, the interim minister of this congregation. So whether this is your first time with us or your 1001st, know you are welcome here and we are glad to have you. We are continuing to improve and offer the best services we can in this time, working in a brave new virtual format and in person. So it's a pleasure to see you both here and online. As we gather, we find comfort and recommit ourselves to the mission of this congregation to support one another in our spiritual journeys, to work for justice, care for the earth, and build the common good. We gather each Sunday to recommit ourselves to dismantling systems of oppression and injustice. It is good to be together. As always in the life of our congregation, we have a lot going on. I wanted to highlight a couple things specifically. Next Sunday at this time, we'll be doing what is a tradition in many Unitarian Universalist congregations, a service about questions, and in which case you can ask me and our Director of Lifespan Spiritual Growth, Ann Richards, any and all questions you have, really. It's all fair game? Yes. Given that we are now in a both in-person and virtual format, I'm asking you to send the questions in ahead of time to my email so that people online can fully participate too. So please, you can send that to minister@mbuc.org. If you have one specifically for Ann, you can send it to me too, and I'll pass it on to her. So think about those questions, send them in. It would be really helpful if the topic line said something obvious like question. Next Saturday, or rather, I'm sorry, not this coming Saturday, but the next one, May 21st from 8:30 to 11 a.m., we're having an introduction to Unitarian Universalism and to Mount Vernon Unitarian Church. If you have been visiting for a while, if you are just getting to know us the tiniest bit and want to know a lot more, this is a great opportunity for you to do that, to find out what becoming a member might look like, to answer any of those questions that I don't get to next Sunday. So please email our membership committee. You can find out that information online. If you're not getting our emails, you can also sign up out in the comments to find out more about that. If you would like to attend, it would be helpful for us to know by next Sunday, by May 15th, so that we can prepare for the right number of people. So today, we are talking about a lot of things in service. We engage mothering, how all of us have been mothered when we've mothered others, whether we are mothers or not, and the reality that there are wonderful relationships and not so great ones that all of us have experienced. We're also celebrating another long-time tradition in this congregation and in many other congregations, the flower ceremony. I'll talk about that a little more later, but know right now, if you have brought flowers, I think we have almost all of them up front. I don't see a lot out there, but you can bring them up during the first hymn. Later in the service, we'll have an opportunity for each of us to come pick out a flower, and I'll explain more about that later, as I said. Lastly, please continue to look to our various modes of communication, to emails and phones and our website for updates about worship and all that is going on in our congregation. And know if you are ever in need, we're just an email or phone call away. So with all of that having been said, I invite us all now to take a deep breath in and out as we prepare to enter into our time of worship.
We light this chalice for mothers and mothering, to celebrate those who have taken on the task of nurturing a young one baby, child, or youth into adulthood, to celebrate those who have nourished the light of truth and compassion in growing minds and hearts, to celebrate those who have committed time, money, and energy to the growth of others in this world. We light this chalice to celebrate and hold dear this flame of love.
I invite us all to rise in body or spirit and join in singing our opening hymn, number 122 in your gray hymnals, Sound Over All Waters.
To speak aloud the covenant of our community. These words are both known within our heart and are on our order of service. Love is the teaching of this church. The quest of truth is its daily task, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve life and community, to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony. This is our covenant with each and with all.
So as I said earlier, we're engaging in a number of things today, and one of them is Mother's Day, but maybe not exactly the Mother's Day that we all know about. I wanted to talk about the original Mother's Day, though there's arguments about which one is original, so I won't go there. This is the Unitarian one. Because Julia Ward Howe was a Unitarian. She was raised in a very conservative family, but found Unitarianism on her as an adult. She was born almost 200 years ago now, and as I said, she grew up with a conservative family, but from a young age, she had rather different ideas than they did. For one thing, she thought that women were every bit as smart and gifted and capable as men. She also believed that slavery was wrong, and not just wrong, that it should be stopped immediately. The popular position at her time, even among liberals, was that slavery should gradually be ended over time. She was an abolitionist, though. She felt that it needed to stop today. And so at the outbreak of the Civil War, she supported the Union forces. In fact, she supported them so much that she wrote the words for a song now known as the Battle Hymn of the Republic, which I will sing briefly here. Feel free to join in. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the faithful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. Everybody knows this part, right? Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. Very good, thank you. I was worried I was going to sing it all by myself for a minute there. So she believed that this was a cause that was worth fighting and dying for, something this important. Now, as the Civil War continued and in the years afterwards, she changed her mind. Not that slavery was wrong. She still very much believed that and was very glad that it had ended. But the Civil War caused such damage. Virtually every family in America lost at least one person in their family. And so she changed her position. She was still happy that slavery was ended, but she was worried that the war had made things worse in a way. Indeed, that violence only made everything ultimately worse, not better. And in short, she came to believe in using only peaceful means. She became what we know as a pacifist. And for someone who had written that hymn, that was a big change. At the same time, she became an even stronger proponent of promoting the rights and roles of women, specifically pushing for women to have the right to vote. And she combined these two ideas, pacifism and what we might today call feminism, into an idea she had, what we now know as Mother's Day, but not the Mother's Day that we celebrate a lot of times today. Instead, she wrote something she called an appeal to women throughout the world. And I'll read more of it later in the service, but to summarize, it calls upon women, specifically mothers, but also all women everywhere, to speak and work for peace. She asked women to come together to work to promote peaceful means of settlement of problems. I think she had also pretty much given up on men's ability to do this. So today, I hope that we take the chance to thank all mothers everywhere, but also to think about what Julia Ward Howe called for, seeking peace and justice throughout the world, and taking a special day to think about those things. As I said, I'll say more about this later in the service, but thank you so much. Jean.
Mount Vernon Unitarian Church continues to share the plate with committed organizations that you, our members, have chosen. During the month of May, our offering is being shared with the Katie Tyson Fund. Many of you, no doubt, know about this, founded by Katie Tyson's parents after her tragic death in a car accident. She was a leader for Unitarian youth, and the proceeds of the fund, which are managed by UUA in Boston, are used to support youth members of UUA so they can go to the annual meeting and achieve other goals. We are as a community that invites spiritual and material generosity from our members and friends. I give at a tithing level because I've been a member of the church since 2008. I came shortly after Kate Walker became your minister. And I thought I felt after years of whizzing up and down all the Protestant denominations, after giving up on Catholicism in which I was raised when I was in college. And After finding none of them satisfactory, I consciously began to look for a denomination that would that would feel like home. And I found Unitarianism. So I systematically went to all the Unitarian churches, one Sunday after another in the vicinity. And as you know, there are quite a few. And I found here. I came and I saw, and I felt I'd found my tribe. And I've been here ever since. So please feel now to give whatever you are most comfortable with in spirit and financial generosity for the mission of our church community. I give with my bank, just sends a check every month with the denominated amount. If you would like to write and mail a check for the offering, please make it to MVUC. And in the memo line, indicate how you would like it used. You can also go to our website to give directly through the website. And we are always so grateful for your donation. Thank you.
I invite you to take a moment to prepare yourself for our time of silence followed by spoken meditation. Get those bagels out, get comfortable in your chair. Let's begin with a time of silence. Spirit of life, you've been a father and mother to us all. We enter in this time of reflection with mixed emotions. This is Mother's Day, a day set aside to honor, celebrate, and in some cases simply to reflect on those who gave us birth. Some of us come to this day with joy, with strong and tender feelings for women who have earned the right to be called mother. They not only gave us our lives, they're responsible for shaping our spirit. They've fed us, played with us, nurtured us, listened to us, have given unselfishly for us, have loved us unconditionally. If our mothers are still living, we may make the extra effort to stay in touch, find ways to give back a portion of the love which we have so abundantly received. If our mothers have died, we take time to cherish our memories of them, memories which may flood our eyes with bittersweet tears of longing. We miss her and feel that loss even more acutely on this day, while also being grateful for her strength, her wisdom, her beauty, and the gifts of life which she has passed on to us. And for others, this day is not a time for celebration, but rather for reflection. Perhaps we cannot bring ourselves to buy that Hallmark card, one that waxes poetically about a mother's love or her presence in our lives. Rather, we may feel her absence through death or indifference. We may have complicated, difficult, unhappy associations with mother. Instead, may we use this time to reflect on those who have mothered us, those in our lives who have shown their love for us, whether through motherhood or mentoring, those tough, gentle, truth-telling, loving, wise, whimsical women who have served as our teachers, our mentors, our guides, our friends on this Mothering Day. May we remember the great mother that sustains us, whose body is the very substance of our existence, the very ground we walk upon, the very source of our being. From whatever place of the Spirit we come this morning, let us once again reflect upon these truths. It is in this reflection where great things fashion themselves. Amen. I invite us all to remain seated as we sing number 388, Dona Nobis Pacem.
I'd like to ask the congregation to sing this 2 times through, and then the choir will finish.
Oh
Norbert Chopek was born in 1880. His mother was a devout Catholic, his father agnostic, which probably sounds familiar to a room full of Unitarian Universalists. He attended the Catholic Church and became an acolyte at age 10 at St. Martin's Catholic Church. In the years that followed, he became disillusioned, though. His priest, indeed, was a cynic. And so at 18, apprenticed to his uncle, who was a successful tailor in Vienna, Austria, Norbert discovered the Baptists and became a minister. And he founded a dozen churches from Ukraine to Budapest. Yet slowly his faith became more and more liberal. He left Bohemia under government threat and accepted a call to serve a Baptist church in New York City. Until one day in 1919 when he wrote in his diary, "I cannot be a Baptist anymore, even in compromise. The fire of new desires, new worlds is burning inside me." And so he and his wife, Maja, joined a Unitarian church in New Jersey in 1921 for the same reason a whole lot of us did. Their children liked the RE program, which says something about the power of Sunday school teachers. World War I had ended. His home country was now independent. He and Maja returned home to Czechoslovakia. His Unitarian church he founded was the Prague Liberal Religious Fellowship, and in just 20 years, his church grew to 3,200 members. He knew that traditional Christian ceremonies like the communion service and bread and wine wouldn't meet the needs of his congregation because his church, much like ours, had people who believed a lot of different things. But he knew he needed some ritual to bring them together too. And so he turned to the beauty of the countryside, to the beauty of flowers. And in 1923, he developed what we now call the flower ceremony. He asked each of his congregants to bring a flower to church from their gardens or the field or the roadside. He invited each person to place their flower in a vase. This was their church community, all different, all unique, but beautiful together. And during the service, each person was invited forward to take a flower from one of those vases, a different one than the one they had brought. He was a visionary minister with a church ahead of his time, a bold church, a church thinking beyond its doors, beyond what might be thought possible. It was a church willing to take risks, to make tough decisions, to bear disappointment, to build in a new way, first by building a church that could build up the world. And that is our church. That was Chopek's church. And for this, the Gestapo arrested him in 1942. He was accused of the high crime of listening to foreign broadcasts, which was true, he had been, and was sent to Dachau. He was starved and tortured there. He was starved and tortured there, but he held a flower ceremony still, finding whatever flowers they could among the weeds of the camp. He was killed there too. But his spirit, courage, and commitment live on today. Those qualities have passed now to us, and it is up to us to make them real. His wife, Maja, brought the flower ceremony to the Unitarian Church in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 1940. What we are about to do is not a historical reenactment of something over and done, but an affirmation of our continuity with generations who struggle for ever-widening liberty. The flower ceremony, lovely though it is, isn't a diversion from ugly reality, but a gentle fierceness which proclaims that in the midst of sinister days, there is always the light of beauty. We're here not to recall something that happened, but to remember something that is happening, to remember, to put it back together again. And in that remembering, may we put ourselves back together again, each as a part of the body of this community, out of many, one. So today we celebrate this ritual of solemnity and joy. As Chapek asks his people to bring a flower and celebrate beauty, so do we. And in a minute, I'll invite us forward, each to take a flower. But first, this blessing written by Norbert Chapek. He wrote, "Infinite Spirit of life, we ask thy blessing on these, thy messengers of fellowship and love. May they remind us, amid diversities of knowledge and of gifts, to be one in desire and affection and devotion to thy holy will. May they also remind us of the value of comradeship, of doing and sharing alike. May we cherish friendship as one of thy most precious gifts. May we not let awareness of another's talents discourage us or sully our relationship, but may we realize that whatever we can do, great or small, the efforts of all of us are needed to do thy work in this world." Amen. We're going to have music. I invite us forward. Let's start with this side of the room and sort of gradually go across so we don't have a traffic jam, to come forward and take a flower. For those joining us online, I picked a flower just for you. This is yours. I begin with parts of the proclamation that Julia Ward Howe wrote. She writes, "Arise then, women of this day. Arise, all women who have hearts. Whether your baptism be of water or of tears, say firmly, we will not have questions answered by irrelevant agencies. Our husbands will not come to us reeking with carnage for caresses and applause. Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience. We, the women of one country, will be too tender to those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure theirs. In the name of womanhood and humanity, I earnestly ask that a general congress of women without limit of nationality may be appointed and held at some place deemed most convenient and the earliest period consistent with its objects, to promote the alliance of the different nationalities, the amicable settlement of international questions, the great and general interests of peace." In this week, I particularly want to jump back to one sentence of that. We, that is women, she writes, will not have questions answered by irrelevant agencies. Which makes me think of the Supreme Court right now. Anyway, Howe calls upon women to do the work of making a better world. And as I said earlier, I think she did this in part because she felt we men have not been up to the task. So I should start by saying I am not going to, as a man, call upon women to go out and do something today. I don't think you need me to tell you what you should do, or the Supreme Court, or whoever. I will suggest to us, though, that her message is a powerful one for all of us today, and her very life a powerful message in and of itself. I do not spend as much time as some of my colleagues talking about the lives and views of our UU forebears, though I think it's important to talk about how and what they did and how it matters today to us. So in this case, I get a chance to do that. Julia Ward Howe lived a powerful life, and it and her ideas still speak as loudly and profoundly as they did more than 100 years ago. She created Mother's Day, but not the Mother's Day we know. Rather, she was one of several people who created Mother's Day, but two other women, a mother and daughter, Anne Jarvis and Anna Jarvis, are often credited with creating Mother's Day, and that's very true. They created something much more like what we know today. Anne was a contemporary of Julia Ward Howe and was working in many of the same circles. Anna, her daughter, was the one who pushed to make Mother's Day a national holiday. The conception all three women had of the day was a more powerful, more activist version, calling upon women like Howe, who had 6 children of her own, by the way, to rise up and make a difference in the world, not to stay in the shadows or inside the homes where they had often been relegated. We could talk about a lot of different things with Julia Ward Howe, her proto-feminism, her push to get women the vote, something she did not live to see herself. I've already talked a bit about her views on slavery and abolition, which put her on the far liberal end of the spectrum of her time. She even weighed in on abortion directly. She and her fellow activists had differing views, but they all agreed that women should have control over their own bodies and decisions. It was central to their ideas. It's hard to read their work and not think they would be in support of what we now call reproductive rights. We could talk about how she changed and grew and refined her ideas about the world over time, something I greatly admire her for. I hate it when somebody finally shows me I'm wrong and I have to change. I don't know that she liked it, but she did it. It is so easy for us to become stuck in who we have been, in what we have believed. I think it's really interesting how she changed and adapted her views over time. She grew up in that conservative household. Her father was a staunch Calvinist. She became quite liberal, and she said it was his fault. Because whatever thoughts her father had about the role of women in the world, he made sure that his daughter got a good education by some excellent private tutors. And her older brother, who had traveled to Europe often, built up a strong private library in the house. It was through that education, that reading, that she came to a very different view of the world than her father, and ultimately made friends with some of the cream of liberal society. This continued after her marriage to Boston physician Samuel Howe. Though he discouraged her from taking public roles in activism, she staunchly ignored him. The couple had 6 children, which I already mentioned, which no doubt took up a fair amount of her time. In the 1850s, influenced perhaps by some of her friends, she became an ardent abolitionist. That is, she worked and advocated for an immediate end to slavery in the United States. Others, even among her liberal friends, were advocating for simply limiting slavery to the southern states or for a gradual end to it over several decades. She felt that this was not adequate. She was such a believer that she supported going to war to stop that slavery and wrote, as I said earlier, the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Later, though, she came to a different conclusion about that. She felt that even to end something as horrific as slavery, war was the wrong way to go. Having lived through the horrors of it, having seen the damage it did, she thought that there must have been a better solution. Now, this is something that's still a controversial issue in our circles. All of us, I think it's safe to say, long for a world of peace. But there are a lot of questions, even among UUs, about the right way to achieve this. Is pacifism the right way? Is violence always wrong? Does it always end badly? Or are there limited situations in which violence is a necessary evil? At the first Unitarian Universalist Association General Assembly I attended in 2009, GA is where all UUs from all over the country and indeed the world come together. The first one I attended in 2009, this very issue came up in the business meeting. There was a draft proposal that had long been in the works, submitted calling upon UU congregations and Unitarian Universalist individuals to support peace in all situations, to become pacifists, to make ours a peace church. We would not be the first or only religious group to do this. Notably, churches like the Quakers, the Brethren, the Mennonites, and others have historically supported this position. But there were others in the General Assembly that opposed this idea, saying that though peace is certainly the ultimate goal, there are times when forceful intervention is necessary. To use the most extreme example, they would say we had to fight in World War II to stop Hitler, to end the genocide of Jews and other minorities. This, or at least some version of it, is known as just war theory, the idea that some war is justified in order to prevent something worse. Pacifists argue that using war to stop war is never going to work. And I agree, there's a certain logic to that. The U.S. civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s had a similar divergence of opinion, you might remember, between those who believed in exclusively nonviolent means and those who felt more direct, forceful action was, at least in some instances, warranted. To end that story, there was a forceful debate among the General Assembly. It was back and forth, and ultimately the proposal was not passed, was sent back for more consideration, and a decade later we're still considering that. And I think that's okay. It's okay sometimes to know that we don't all agree on something and that we need to continue to work on it. To get back to Julia Ward Howe, she spent the latter half of her life heavily involved with groups supporting women's rights, particularly to get women the vote. The proclamation, which I read most of earlier, makes it pretty clear. She felt nothing was going to get better for women or anyone else until women took a significant role in public leadership, and that meant in part voting. And I think it's clear to say that she was right. I note that many of the most important pieces of legislation, the most important movements of the last century, the arts and sciences, have involved the contributions of women to a larger and larger extent, even if they haven't always been adequately recognized. What would our world look like without the contributions of women? And though I think motherhood is an incredible contribution on that front, there's so much more too. We could talk about Rosa Parks or Agatha Christie or Barbara Jordan or Margaret Thatcher, though I don't really want to talk about Thatcher. Rosalind Franklin and Jane Goodall, Aung San Suu Kyi, Amelia Earhart, so many more, not all perfect, none of them perfect, but powerful, creative, interesting women. The contributions of women have changed the world. And of course, the truth is that they always have, but I think no more so than in our time here and now. Which leads me to the question, with so much changed in the last century, what would Julia Ward Howe make of our world today? What would she be calling us to work for in this modern world? I think she'd be both pleased and dismayed at the state of women in our current society, happy to see so much progress. The vote has been made, and that's sad that so much still remains to be made. Watching the way women in the public eye are often treated makes me despair about our culture, even as I know things are probably better than they used to be in so many ways. This week, in which we learned it is likely that Roe v. Wade will be overturned at some point, I think she would be dismayed. What would Howe and the Jarvises think of Mother's Day today? Again, probably split opinions. Sure, it's wonderful to celebrate our mothers and motherhood in general, but when they first talked about this, it was a time not merely to be celebrated, but to be valued and respected for thoughts and work and leadership. I think they would be dismayed at the capitalism that has overlaid and overtaken the holiday. What might Howe think of the state of war or violence in our world? If we look at statistics, which can be misleading, it appears that actually this is one of the least violent and warlike eras in the world's history, experts tell us, but it doesn't feel that way. We still have horrible violence and war affecting so many people in so many places, all around the world. Howe would certainly call us to do something to stop this. She already has called us to do so. To quote her again, she said, "We must promote the alliance of the different nationalities, the amicable settlement of international questions, the great and general interests of peace." It's upon all of us to do this today. It's not easy work, it's hard work. It is work that, even done with our best intentions, can go wrong. It is work none of us can do alone, that we must bring others to do as well, to work across differences, to build coalitions if we have any hope of making real progress. Because I do know that we are called to make a better world, to find a way to live in peace, to seek, as our second principle of the Unitarian Universalist Association says, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. And until we find a way to live into this, we still have work to do. Until we live in a world that values all people, that has peace for all those people, our work is not done, friends. So today I say, let the work continue. May it be so.
And as you're willing and able, turn in your hymnals to number 159. 159, This Is My Song.
This is my home.
me in saying the words of our chalice, extinguishing? We
We
extinguish,
extinguish this flame,
but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we gather together again.
Arise, people of this day, and go work for peace. Work for the rights of all. Work for a better world. Our worship has ended, and our service begins. I invite you to remain seated for our postlude.